thank you, everybody. And once again, we need to take a moment and just acknowledge how powerful that previous talk was before we just jump right into a very different subject matter. I cannot say enough how much I admire both Kelly and Tammy for handling that in a sensitive and respectful way as they could without while still talking about something so powerful and so raw. That was valuable, to say the least. Yeah. But we are here to talk about content creation. And, for many folks who have been on this panel, who are on this panel, have been on panels with me or with other people here talking about content creation and wellness before. And we've largely approached this at events like PAX with a very individual streamer, how to be help yourself type of approach. But here, with all these fantastic industry folks, we want to approach this from the perspective of industry and systemic changes that are necessary. And before we get into that, let's go down the line. Let's have everybody introduce themselves. On my immediate left on my screen is Mxiety. Mxiety, you want to tell everybody who you are, what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. B. Hi, everyone. Nailed it. Hi, everyone. I'm Mxiety. I am a mental health talk show host trying to bring everything mental health to everyone through expert interviews, firsthand lived experience, stories, personal stories, in a wonderful, warm community. I also self-published a book recently. I have a blog that is an aggregation of all of the resources that I have been working to find meant to help people and who are experiencing mental health challenges. And I am a Take This ambassador.
Awesome.
Cherry is after me. I don't know if she's...
Cool.
Yeah. Well, Cherry, if you'd like to take it away.
I think it's different on everyone's screen, right? So
I think so, yes.
That's fun. Hi, I actually have never felt more like an imposter than today, so that's really interesting. I am actually a games developer, and I work at Ubisoft as my official title is Accessibility Project Manager, but I'm allowed to call myself an accessibility punk because my manager says so. Not really. Just on Twitter. Anyway, I've already gone off the rails. I have been making content on the internet of some kind for about 20 years now. And until last week, I was also a streamer on Twitch. I'm not going to go through all the things I've done over the years because it's a lot and I am a lot older than I look, but I think I'm the grandparent of the group, maybe. Anyway, that's it basically. But right now I'm a games developer. So I'm going to pass it on to Celesmeh.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Celes. I am a content creator on Twitch. I play video games during the week, and on weekends I have a show called Self-Care Saturday. So outside of Twitch, I'm actually a scientist. So what we try to do for Self-Care Saturdays is that we'll pick a topic. I'll go through the week and kind of look at peer-reviewed journals and break it down from a scientific perspective, and then approach mental health from a peer-reviewed scientific perspective. And I apologize if you can hear the sirens outside of my apartment. Ash is next.
Hi, I'm Ash Paulsen. I am a content creator and producer on YouTube and off YouTube. I do stuff everywhere. I'm most well known for my work with Game Explain, YouTube channel. It covers primarily Nintendo content, but now we've really branched out into everything, PlayStation, Xbox, PC, but we're still firmly known for Nintendo. And I'm here just to talk about the general practice of content creation, I guess, as it relates to mental health. For me, it's all about bringing smiles to faces, including everybody, making everybody feel like they belong, because they do and they should. And it should be a safe space for everybody. That's what gaming should be. So I am lucky enough to be able to use the platform. I have been, fortunate enough to get through Game Explain to really reach out to as many people as I can and just let them know that they do matter. and that they have a space here. And so I'm really honored to be here with the rest of you, especially you guys are also accomplished. You're also amazing. Hearing you go down your list of accomplishments. So I'm very honored to be here among the rest of you. So thank you.
And well, thank you all. For anybody who doesn't know me, I am Raffael Boccomazzo, better, more affectionately known as Dr. B, because people take a look at my last name and just go, no. I'm a doctor of clinical psychology, and I am the clinical director at Take This. And let's just jump into this. Every one of you has very different experiences, and you all have very different niches within content creation. And content creation in and of itself is a very weird thing. Have you ever tried explaining that to a health provider, like what stresses are in your life? What was their reaction when you tried to explain your job to someone outside of this industry?
Oh man, I mean, I've had that. I guess I've had that issue for a while, not just as a content creator, but because I've worn so many different hats and I've worked from home for so long. And when you work from home, anybody who does that knows people don't quite get it. They're like, oh, well, you're not really working. You're available anytime. And it's like, no, I'm actually working from home. So, I've been a producer. I've been a copy editor, a layout editor. Yeah. And now a content creator. And it's something I think that has become a little bit more ubiquitous in the age of COVID, especially, but also just more recently as content creation, we've seen the rise of people make content creation their full-time jobs. But now, especially now that everybody's stuck at home, more or less, I think we're seeing kind of just a more top level understanding of what it means to be a content creator.
So I actually had a couple of, I get one of two reactions. One is, so are you a cam girl? which is like, no. And the other is, wait, you play video games online? Why would anyone want to watch that? So it's not really in between those two. Like it's one or the other. And I never really understand why, but it seems to be like, the way I usually describe it is like, well, you watch people play sports, right? So why not watch someone play a video game? But yeah, that's usually, I try to explain it, and the reactions I get are usually one of those two things.
I would say, so most recently I was at a doctor's appointment and I told the doctor that I was like, I'm a mental health advocate at night. Haha. And he like just kind of did okay. I was like, well, so, I have a live stream where I talk about mental health. And he's like, this is a medical doctor. So he's like, oh, I was like, well, I don't give advice. So, and that's like usually the like third thing that I have to say immediately, because people hear like, I go and I talk to people about mental health and they assume it's like a Dr. Phil situation and don't want anybody to think that. But it's usually a mix of that confusion and like, oh, and so you just talk to people. I'm like, yeah, it's a community and they return and it's actually fantastic. I'm very grateful to have all of them. And they're just like, okay. And the conversation is usually very abruptly like, we don't need to talk about this anymore.
Yeah, I think for me, it's always been weird because I've never done just one thing. I'm kind of one of those people that multitask at all times, probably because I am autistic and have ADHD and literally cannot just do one thing, have to do it all. Let's not go there. But so for me, it's been like I've always had to break it down. And like healthcare professionals are one thing because like often they're not part of that community or like don't really understand that industry necessarily, or that it even is an industry. And so like explain it to healthcare professionals, it's more like kind of like, well, I manage a community, like there's all these people and they understand like online communities. They're like, oh, okay, we get that. And then you explain live streaming to them and all that. But for me, I've actually even had people in my community when I have talked about like my job or my work, even before I was full-time game dev, when I was part-time game dev as a consultant at the same time as being a content creator. And they'd like, oh, I didn't think you had a real job. And I'm like, you're literally paying me to do this. What do you think this is. So like it's one of those weird situations that even your community don't always get it. So like, how do you expect a healthcare professional who doesn't even necessarily know anything about games to like really get that?
Well, so there's this divide between the non-game industry side of things, and Cherry's bringing this up with their community, even within the game industry and within our various communities, people don't necessarily understand that this can be full-time work. But one of the things I'm not sure I've ever asked any of you directly, what are some of the unique obstacles that you all face in regards to your mental wellness or even your physical wellness? Like, what is it that you face on a day-to-day level that you have to struggle with, optimize, however you frame
it? Sitting all day. And it really, because there used to be this in my brain when I used to go to an office for my 9 to 5, and then I would get up, walk to my car, I don't know, 20 feet, and then get in my car, sit some more, and then walk to my door from my car. And in my head, I was like, well, I'm moving a little bit, but now I have to like actively get myself up. And I also have to do what I call like the transfer. And as an somebody with ADHD, this is exceptionally hard. Because I kind of like, I love anxiety and it's my passion and I want to be doing it all the time. And if I'm sitting at this desk, it feels like it's anxiety time versus I have to bring like my work laptop and do work from home for my 9 to 5. And so I have to have a ritual where I close okay, it's 5 o'clock. I close the computer. I go refresh my tea. Like I have to do a bunch of stuff, transitional things to get me into like anxiety mode. Whereas that used to be taken care of with physically getting up and going to a car, now I have to like make that divide. So that might be like, I'll walk my dog. It might be, it might be like, I'm going to go and have like a brief dinner kind of thing, but there needs to be like a 15-minute at least separation from 9 to 5 me to current me. Otherwise, like I will sit down and I will start my stream and I will still be in like project management mode, which is not as fun as anxiety mode.
So essentially a blending of identities, especially when we're dealing with things in the same space. And that's something I've actually heard from a variety of content creators, that especially since they work from home, the idea of work-home separation is a particularly challenging one. I'm seeing nods from everybody else.
Yeah. That may be something that I was more uniquely prepared for, only because I worked from home for a long time before I got with Game Explain and went into more fuller time content creation. But it absolutely is difficult, especially for me. I have a hard time with motivation. Especially like in the mornings, I feel awful. I'm not a morning person. I struggle a lot with depression and anxiety. And so in the mornings I have zero motivation. And when I know that I'm not going to be seeing anybody all day other than my incredible wife, who I just love and adore. But when I'm not going to be going out all day, when I'm not going to be traveling and such, I miss all that a lot. So it's very difficult for me to stay motivated. But I think the thing I might struggle with most on a day-to-day basis is the feeling of exposure. Because when you do content creation, especially when you're working for a larger channel or you become big of your own volition, you're exposed on a major platform like Twitter or YouTube or Twitch or whatever. And so everything you say, it feels as though it gets put under a microscope. And you don't want to go too far down that road and start thinking that what you say is too important or matters too much, because you don't want to be egotistical about it. But it can be pretty, I remember when I was small time and had a few hundred followers on Twitter, I'd say whatever I want because no one was looking, But now that I know that I have a platform, I have to be very careful, what discussions I get drawn into, because I'm not a big fan of, well, who's a fan of getting into internet arguments, right? Nobody is. But, I feel very exposed when I get confronted on something that, I'll double down and even if I know I'm right, it still makes me feel a lot of anxiety kind of getting into a confrontation on the Twitter sphere stage or the YouTube stage, or, YouTube comments or what have you. So I think for me, trying to reckon with that feeling of exposure and keeping that anxiety at bay from feeling that exposed is kind of what I probably struggle with most on a day-to-day basis.
Jerry, Celeste, what have you?
Yeah, I feel like both of those things touch on some of my obstacles. Like I could talk about both those things for a really long time, and like parasocial relationships especially is like I have like a fairly sizable Twitter following, and it's like and that's where before I was on Twitch, I did a little bit of YouTube, and I had a fairly sizable Twitter following from my previous career, and it's just kind of carried on, and you do get kind of like that weird, like where people know you more than you know them, and the way they talk to you is just like super inappropriate sometimes, but they have no idea, and you can't like tell them how inappropriate they're being or how wrong they are about your situation or what you're even talking about. But I'm gonna probably get a little bit more systemic than that, maybe. I'm gonna wind back a little bit to when I started streaming on Twitch. I promise this won't be long, maybe it will. I'll try not to make it a long story.
Your long stories are fantastic, though.
Okay, I'll try and nutshell it. But so when I started streaming on Twitch, I was very sick. Like I was in and out of hospital. I had heart surgery that year. And I had an organ infection. Like I had all these like ridiculous things. And it was several years after also having strokes and like all these things that kind of caused disability or like progressed my disability. And during that process, I wasn't able to work for about 2 years, except for like here and there. And I've actually been self-employed for like most of my adult life. So I'm 39 now, so that's a very long time, until I started at Ubisoft this year. And so I've always worked from home. I always but I always overworked. I'm a workaholic, like 100%. I think my mental health contributes to that because I'm a perfectionist and not in the way that people think perfectionism works. And I'd got into this position where I was very sick and my body was having to recover. And so I coped with that with games. I couldn't play very many games, how I got into accessibility. But the games I could play, like I coped with that and I live tweeted them and people were like, you should stream on Twitch. You'd be such a good Twitch streamer. But I was terrified of being on camera. Like I'd spent so much of my last career, like in the public eye and like at comic conventions and like on panels and like all these things. And that's a very toxic environment. And I didn't want to end up backing that toxic environment. And I knew that streaming could possibly be that. But at the same time, I had people that were like, we'll support you, we'll like help you and blah, blah. And I had friends that like were my moderators from the very beginning. And like, I kind of like had this steep curve where I took off and was very successful to begin with. And then it kind of plateaued. But from the very beginning, I struggled with the physical aspect of streaming, like not just the mental health aspect, like that was definitely a big part of it. And like, obviously you cannot, I really believe you cannot separate physical and mental health. But what we hear a lot, and maybe we've heard a lot today, is that physical health is not stigmatized, and that's just not true. Like, accidents are not stigmatized. Breaking your leg, tearing a knee ligament, doing something while you're skiing, like those are not stigmatized. The flu is not that stigmatized. The real physical, physical toll that people live with and the chronic conditions people live with are just as stigmatized as mental health and in a very similar way. And I think we can't separate them, right? And so for me, from the very beginning of streaming, there was this, at the beginning, I tried to take it very casually. I'm like, I'm just doing it for fun. Like, it's just to pass the time. Like, people have asked me to do this. And then people showed up and I was like, well, now I owe these people because they've showed up and they said they would. And people were asking me, how do you start with an audience of 15? And I'm like, well, you just have a Twitter following. Like, I don't know. And so then I felt like I owed people and I got very serious about it. I built a PC, like I really got into it. I saw it as a really good platform for education and advocacy, and I did a lot of that work about disability in particular and mental health. But the problem was in that whole time that I was trying to break down that stigma of talking about this stuff and like providing a community for people to come to and share their experience, I was hiding it. And I was pushing through. I was streaming for way too long, way too many days, because the industry makes you think you have to do that to be successful and not let people down. And so I'm just gonna, like, I didn't expect to cry this early, but systemically, like, that's the pressure that everyone in this industry is under. And sure, I was unique. I was in a very unique position. Like, I was on IV nutrition, like that's how sick I was. And I'd been on a feeding tube, and I was at the extreme end of how unwell I was and how I was pushing through that and maybe making things worse. But whether someone has a chronic condition or not, this industry is hard on people, and like pushing through and doing long streams and trying to get through those obstacles, I think are very real, and no one talks about them. Like, not no one, but, you know, like very few people, and it's taboo to talk about it. And from the very beginning, I even though I was saying one thing to my community and encouraging them and supporting them, I was not doing the same for myself.
So
that was longer than I meant it to be, sorry.
That's great. I guess maybe my perspective is different, right? At no point during COVID have I been able to work from home. Unfortunately, the scientific research I'm involved in is considered essential. So throughout all of this, I've still been going into work, into lab. And when I stream, it's after my work, at the end of the day, like into the night or on weekends. And I think that part of what Cherry was saying is very true. I always try to be on for my audience, and I always try to be on for like my community, and I want to try and support them, and I want to give them like good content, and that feeling of responsibility is really there. But it's hard when like I've had a rough day at work and I'm tired and I go home and all of a sudden like I have my other work. And I think people also don't realize how much time you put into it. Like sometimes, like, yeah, maybe I'll be on screen for 4 to 6 hours, right? But when I am off that, I spend hours doing graphic design. I spend hours preparing like different effects and, you know, stuff for the community. And I have a group of like moderators that, you know, we work together to create like a community and events for the community that they can all like engage in an active manner, right? And so that's like easily a second job. And one of the things that I think for me is the hardest is just that separation of like real life and online life almost, right? Because online I am one person. I'm not even using my real name for this panel, right? But that's because I am a published scientist on the other side, right? So if I am talking to people as a scientist, a lot of times they'll look at games and they'll look at this industry and they'll just look down on it. On the other hand, right, like I have this industry that I love and that has helped me so much, like games in general have helped me so much, and I want to use that and the knowledge that I have to help others, right? But it's this weird like dichotomy of I have to keep things separate, but at the same time, like they're both aspects of myself. So that's, I don't necessarily have to deal as much with the staying at home and like sitting all the time, but like what I do have to deal with is like either exhaustion from covering heavy mental health topics, which usually takes an entire day out of my week, right? Like if I do a self-care Saturday, generally after that self-care Saturday, I will fall asleep for 4 hours, right? It's usually very like emotional for me. Or if something's going on in my community, especially having a community that focuses on mental health, right? I have a lot of users in my community who struggle with a lot of the same things that I struggle with, right? And as an advocate, you try your best to help and point them in the right direction. But like the emotions that I feel around those situations, like I have to keep them separate from when I'm at work and I'm doing my research side of things, right? So consolidation,
compartmentalizing. And this is something I've heard from a couple of you so far. But one of the things I got to ask this bluntly, because this has been an ongoing question that people have talked about for years. But right now, there are roughly 31 million YouTube channels. Okay. That's just the ones with 5 subs or more. There are, when I was looking into the stats just yesterday, a couple days ago, there were 120,000 Twitch streamers streaming in that moment. There are an abundance of people. There are not necessarily an abundance of platforms. Cherry has addressed things like gatekeeping, systemic forms of gatekeeping. And as such, what do you think the responsibilities are of the platforms to address the wellness needs of the literally millions of people who are building their businesses?
I
I
mean,
have
this.
strong opinions.
Go ahead. Well, then
Well,
you go first.
That's the point.
Go ahead.
This is
Big fave.
I mean, I guess I could just say it comes down to, I mean, this is just, I guess everybody would say this, moderation, better moderation at all on the platform end. And that is somewhere both YouTube and Twitch have failed so miserably when it comes to just moderation on the platform side. And you shouldn't, one of my golden rules for creating content anywhere, but also on Game Explain, is don't look at the comments. Never go into the comments section, because people by and large don't care about you. They're there to make a drive-by comment, whether it's kind or not, and many of them are kind, but they don't care about the person typically behind the content. But I shouldn't have to say that. Nobody should have to be afraid of comment sections, or at least dreadful of them. If only people could be counted on to be kind just because they want to be kind, but unfortunately that's not the kind of world we live in. But, YouTube and Twitch like to make a lot of ado about how, we don't tolerate hate and racism and sexism and transphobia and homo. They like to say that, but that never actually happens in practice. And I think we would all be so much better off as content creators and streamers if we could actually count on that platform side support. But we can't. It's the Wild West out there, as you all know. And
Yeah.
it feels as though there is no support other than your own, just refusal to go look at YouTube comments or Twitch chat or what have you. And that needs to change from a top-down level, in my opinion.
So I think I would break it down into 3 different categories. It's accessibility, safety, and inclusivity, right? So like, first is making sure that not only is like your platform and the tools to engage with it accessible to both content creators and viewers. And that includes games, like the amount of games that I've seen that don't have options for, people who are colorblind, or don't have like proper closed captions, and that like can harm, or like that includes some kind of sound element that is completely lost if you can't engage with it, right? There's so many things on the accessibility side in both like the platform and the games that we're playing that need to be addressed, right? And then the other is what Ash was saying, which is like the safety of both the content creator and the community. Like when I'm streaming, I expect to see trolls. I stream under both the mental health and the LGBTQ tag, right?
Bless you.
And thanks. But it's one of those things that I have to have my moderators in my chat, because I can't always catch what's going on, and people will deliberately go in to say really messed up stuff. They will deliberately try to derail the conversation, hurt people in my community, or like try to bother me or trigger me or say things in a certain way. And I have a very specific approach to handling trolls in my chat. I like to tell my mods that I play with my food, but the only reason that I'm allowed to do that is because I have them there supporting me, right? But I'm lucky because I actually have a community that's willing to do that, right? That's willing to support me. But if I didn't have that, then I don't think that I could do what I do on like a weekly basis. And some of the messages that you get can be really messed up. And all you can do is report and hope for the best. Block them, hope for the best. I had one person send me from multiple accounts detailed like lists of the things that they were going to do to me to hurt me at a constant rate for months. And I kept blocking the account and then just swapping to the next like account every single time. And there was nothing I could do. And I kept trying to contact like Twitch for help. And in the end, like, I guess they lost interest, but it was months of these kinds of messages, right? And then like the last thing, which is something that I'm a big advocate for, is inclusivity, right? We have streamers who are people of color like myself, or we have people who are part of the LGBTQ community, right? And we have people who are like human beings in general are intersectional beings, right? So it's hard when you see that if you look at top streamers, if it's okay to say this, right? They're mostly just white dudes. And like, honestly, it's hard because you'll see things like what Twitch did for Hispanic Heritage Month, which was not great. Or, you know, how they handled the Black Lives Matter movement on their own platform was not fantastic. And you see companies doing the same thing over and over again. YouTube has created a system that pretty much systematically will demonetize LGBTQ content creators, right? And so it becomes this like, I don't know, this game of trying to catch up to the platform, doing things that make it hard for people within these like marginalized communities to engage with the platform. So overall, again, like, it's about accessibility, safety, and inclusivity for me, at least.
I want to expand on what Ash was saying because I feel like it is incredibly relevant, right? So when you have 100 people streaming to your platform and you're just in TV, maybe you can get away with not caring about Black lives and LGBTQ and all of those things. But Twitch is now part of the system. It is part of the bigger system. And I believe that by that extension, the same way that I as a creator cannot just ignore things that are happening and just not tweet about it, they cannot be ignoring the needs of their very, very diverse community, of the people who are putting in hours of sweat and mental health concerns and everything into their platform in order to stream and to create content. So to see the big, I have a lot of problems, but I don't know that. So I say big and not biggest, but big issue is that they're just not listening. Like, there's so many discussions happening. So for example, it's for those who don't have the context for the Hispanic Heritage Month.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, jeez.
Do we want to bring it up, or we?
No,
yeah,
it's fine. Go ahead. Let's do this.
It's out there
Let's
now.
Let's do this.
Oh, man.
Well, there's no going back. So they
right.
offered you to put a little sombrero or maracas on your emotes as a way to honor Hispanic heritage. And
Porque we're all Mexican, of course.
Or you,
All
Right,
stereotypical.
right. And I was just thinking, like, you know what? I'm really grateful y'all didn't do anything for Mental Health Awareness Month. I don't even want to know what that would have been. Or like any other.
Do you remember
heritage.
when they said that the G in LGBTQ stands for gamer? Because I remember when they did that.
Yeah. So, but that to me just screams of tone deafness, of you're not listening to the people who are making your thing. And that is what's baffling and deeply upsetting, is because you have people like Cherry, like Celeste, like all of us here who are saying, hey, I'm willing to sit down with you even if you need to like get a play-by-play. I, as a representative of my community, I can tell you how maybe this can be better handled. And they have that, they have access to that. They have so many, even if they just engage their partners, that's 418,000 people. That is a good chunk of data that you can get to just run stuff by, to be like, hey, is this racist? Hey, is this ableist? Hey.
completely honest, one of the conversations that I've had with people within the industry, seeing a lot of these responses from like Twitch and YouTube, right, is the like the idea of, if you had one person of color, if you had one LGBT, just the one, you asked literally like a person, just one.
Right.
I feel like this wouldn't have happened. And so that tells you about who they're listening to, because either they've created a like environment where a person like of a minority community can't speak up, or they simply don't have them and aren't listening to them. And both of those things are problematic.
Are bad.
I do want to say, having worked on the other side of it, there is sometimes one person that they go to and they listen to. And the problem is unless that one person is an expert in sensitivity, diversity, any of these issues, they're being thrust with the responsibility of representing an entire community. And like the Latin community, which is a diverse group of so many different cultures and people from so many different countries, like that is, you can't put that on one person. And I think that's part of the systemic problem I see, is this idea that yes, if you just asked one person, but no, actually, like you could ask one disabled person on the street how to represent disabilities, they'd be wrong for, they may be wrong for like 99% of people with disabilities. And so like like working in this job, you cannot ask one person, unless like the only situation where you could work with one person is if they have a proven track record and that is their job. And the reason I say that is because when it's your job, you are educated on the entire community, you are educated on the rights movements, you are educated on the politics of it, you keep up with these things, you are educated on all the tropes from across media, not just gaming. Like it's an expertise. And I think that's the thing that people don't realize. Like you see this from the LGBTQ community, which I am a member of. Like I get very frustrated with our community sometimes, because I do feel like everyone in their enthusiasm to make things right and their passion and their like how driven they are to like make the world better, they put themselves in these positions where one, they're not protecting themselves, and it could be their head that like takes responsibility for when it goes wrong, and two, they don't actually have that expertise. It's just their lived experience. And like I say just because lived experience is super important. And like even me as an accessibility expert and a senior accessibility expert, I still work with players with disabilities because their lived experience is number one and central to my job. But I bring those people in and I like facilitate those conversations and make sure that they're happening. And that's why if you have an expert that can do the work and has the protections and the support and the education with that comes officially, or like self-education, because I am self-educated and I believe in that, like that's who can facilitate it. So that your one person and who that is matters, right? Like and what their job is and how.
So like I just want to make this distinction clear. I think what I was trying to get across more than anything is just that I think that one person is better than none, right? Like I'm not necessarily saying you need one person every time. On the contrary, I agree with you. I am a Latina woman, and when I saw what they did for Hispanic Heritage Month, I was greatly disappointed because that has nothing to do with my culture, right? And like many of us were speaking out about it because it just kind of distilled a entire continent of countries, along with, you know, many other people, into three emotes that are presumably of like one country's culture, sort of, because it's a stereotype, right? But what I was trying to really get across is just right now it seems like even if they are going to one person, like it's not working. You need more than like just anything greater than whatever number, whatever n of like you have right now is better than whatever is going on.
I don't understand. Sorry to interrupt. Twitch has there been like a giant firing on Twitch? Like, is Twitch not making money? Like, because I work, without revealing where I work for a multi-international conglomerate. And I will tell you, we have more than one person who vouches for everything. Nothing that I put out goes out the door with just one person looking at it. There's at least 4 people who have to okay it. So if something were to go wrong, there'd be 4 people being like, well, I approved it because of this reason. I approved it. So like, is it an issue of, I don't believe it's an issue of funding, I guess is where I'm going to. Like,
No, it's
sorry.
definitely not. It's like, so there's the systemic problem in the games industry. It's not just
Right.
Twitch. It's not just content creation. It's like all
Right.
of games. It's a very young industry. It's kind of an immature industry. The comics industry is very similar. And these things need processes. Someone needs to have designed these processes and put these processes in place. And perhaps where you work, those processes are there. Someone's done that, or a group of people have done that. If no one has consciously and deliberately set out to make those processes part of how it works, then it, doesn't exist. And it all depends on how how much support in the organization there is at the top, and how much it comes down, because it doesn't matter how much the people lower down want things to happen if they are reined in by the top, or like they don't have the room, or they don't feel safe enough. And we see this across the games industry. And to be honest, like, I heard that there was a Latin person that consulted on those emotes. And like, that's why I'm saying that sometimes that one person isn't the right person. And that's the problem, is like, there aren't those processes, there isn't the checks and the balances. And like, I'll be completely honest, like, I've gone from, oh, I'm about to get a knock, I'm sorry, Amazon delivery, work from home problems. They're so loud, I have a glass door. So I will be honest, like, I'm angry at the content creation industry. I am angry at these platforms, because I know that this is a systemic problem. It's a processes problem. It's how much support there is within that organization. And we see the fallout and we see the problems. And I get very passionate and heated about this because I've been embroiled in this for so long, and it's exhausting, and this is my job. And not this in particular, like, not diversity, but like accessibility is my job, and it's very similar, even though a lot of my job is game design. A lot of it is this kind of advocacy and processes and systemic issues. The thing is that for me, like, I don't want to, like, I'm always the person to bring hope. I will be 100% honest, I don't have a ton of hope today. But where I'm trying to put my hope is not in Twitch, is not in the platforms. I've lost faith in those platforms, which is why I left streaming. I don't think they can protect us. I don't think that our safety is number one. The harassment and abuse I faced in that industry is so bad. I cannot talk about it on a video like this because it's graphic and awful. And it will trigger someone. And like, I don't believe Twitch wants to protect us. But what I do believe and what I do have hope in is below that, is everyone else involved in this industry. Like, I believe that games publishers, games developers, I know games developers, like, I'm one of them. We care and we believe so much in the good of people and the good of our communities and creating good communities. And there's so many of us working on that now, that's where I see the strength coming from. And what I want to see for content creation in the future, if the platforms cannot step up and do the work we need them to, we need the sponsors to do that. We need the games publishers that work with content creators to do that. And we need, like, you know, the peripheral companies that sponsor, like Logitech and, you know, Razer and all these companies that sponsor and support content creators. They can be the cultural change that we need. They can be the ones to put out the videos and center creators of all different kinds, regardless of what their numbers are, because we all know you don't get the numbers if you are not a white man. Like, it's so hard. And I've seen them doing the work. Like, I've seen Logitech doing the work. Like, it's happening. And that's where my hope is. It's like, not in the platforms as much as I want the platforms to do it. We've been trying for so long to get them to do it. And so that's what I want to see. I want to see an end to like toxic supplement esports nonsense that just like brings up this toxicity. I want to see more of like the companies that are willing to do, say, a women in games event where women in games get an advanced screening. 505 Games did that with Control. Like these kind of things, like Logitech do their creator spotlights. If they start talking about mental health, if they start talking about physical health, if they start talking about the well-being of content creators and centering that conversation and making it clear that that's what they stand for, and that they're there for their creators, I think there's a lot of power in that could shift the platforms. Because I've seen it happen, and what really needs to happen is like, there needs to be a voice that kind of pushes corporations, because they don't care. That their businesses, it's money, it's capitalism. And so what we need to do is show them that that means money, that means that people mean money, and that without your content creators' health, there isn't, like, they're reliant on the fact that there are infinite content creators. I've been in this industry for 20 years in different fields. There's always someone to take your place. And that's why our safety isn't number one. That was a bit of a rant, I'm sorry.
No, it's an important rant. There's a lot of things that have been said by a lot of folks, and this is the opportunity to really amplify some of those voices, some of the things that need to be heard. And, you know, what we're hearing from all of you is that you don't feel safe in many respects, and that is something that you want to see from a top-down approach, is essentially protection for you, the person who is providing the revenue stream for the companies. And it's not, and you even go in expecting, I mean, even we heard Ash say, don't read the comments.
And I say that as a straight white male. I mean, if I'm saying that, and I'm completely aware of just how privileged I am among all of you. I mean, I'm talking about exposure. I'm talking about how horrible it is. Every experience is important, but what I've gone through isn't even a sliver of the harassment and the nonsense that you all have been exposed to. And I want to see more content creators who look like me stop abdicating their responsibility to be the connective tissue between people who look like me and everybody else. Because unfortunately, I've learned that people who look like me are more likely to listen to someone who looks like me, to someone who looks like them, than they are the rest of you, which is nonsense. That should not be the case, but that's where we find ourselves. And I believe it is, you know, my role as someone who's lucky enough to count myself among this community, who is part of the lowest risk group in terms of being a heterosexual white male, to lift others up. And I want to see more of people who look like me doing that. And I hear everything you're saying, and I agree with what it seems to be a lack of hope that the platforms are going to get it together. So we have to go lower than that. And I'm so sorry that you all go through everything that you go through, and it needs to be better.
I think I want to say as well, like, everyone goes through it. And I mean,
Sure.
That thing when Ninja was like, I won't play with women because, you know, whatever he said, like, that was awful. That was sexist, but it was a symptom of the problems in our industry. I mean, it was a symptom that he will face harassment and toxicity for playing with women. And like, that's to say that like white men do face this, straight white men do face this harassment and this toxicity too. And that doesn't mean you're not affected by it. Even if
Sure.
you get a leg up and build an audience, in the end, that doesn't mean you're safer, right?
Right.
So we're going a couple minutes over. We're gonna go for a 3:35 stop time since everyone's kind enough to give us give everybody a 5-minute break before we started this panel. But I want to make sure y'all get the last words. So like lightning round, 30 seconds. If everybody watching this can take one thing away from this panel, what do you want it to be?
Perspective outside of your own situation. Really try to put yourself out there and try to imagine being in someone else's shoes, because your experience is only one of billions, and it's so easy to slide into apathy and thinking that we're all kind of going through the same things. We're not. And really just try to see things from other perspectives and see why safe spaces are necessary. Maybe you don't need one, and that's fine. You're lucky. But really try to see things from other perspectives and understand why other people do need safe spaces.
Who wants to follow that up?
It's not, somebody said it better than me. I'm not the first one to say it, but it's not a pie, like opportunity and helping others. Like, it's not like a slice of pie and you're going to run out. If there's endless amounts of creators, like Sherry said, there's endless amounts of creators, then there's endless possibilities of what those creators can do. Then there's endless possibilities of what you can do to help them, and then what they can accomplish with those opportunities. So just consider the fact that just because, even if you feel like other people, this is too much of a leg up, or they already have the opportunity and they're just not taking it, whatever, like if that's how you feel, there's like Sherry said, there's years of the system supporting that. So I can understand where that's coming from, just even though I think it's terrible, but just consider the fact that if you give somebody something, it doesn't take away from you. And so just consider the opportunity that you have to give something to someone that you see they can't get on their own.
Nicely put. Sherry, Celeste?
I'm trying to think of how I want to put it. Do you want to go first, Sherry?
It's complex.
Yeah, it is, and doing it fast is really hard, but I think both Mxiety and Ash said it really well. So for me, it's mostly just like, do have hope. Like, I left because I have a lot on my plate. If I didn't have so much on my plate, maybe I'd keep fighting. And so like, I want to see more support across content creators. I want to see more groups of content creators coming together and supporting each other. It's a highly competitive industry because capitalism makes it that way. And I think Mxiety is right. You don't need to be that way. The system is set up to make us feel that way. And I don't think we have to be. I think again, it's like a reflection of what's going on. It's not who we are. And especially when we start, none of us start out that way. It just kind of ends up being that way. And so it's really like, I'd really love to see that. So like where Ash is talking about like, white men will listen to white men. And so they're the ones that have to say these things. Okay, cool. Bring in, marginalized creators, partner with them, do co-streams with them, do, collaborations with them on YouTube, like do all these things together and support each other. I'd love to see a community where streamers can come together and talk about the financial problems they have, the business problems, the endless contracts they have to read through, or like even their mental health, or like how to set boundaries or limits, or like not stream too long when you're all wrapped up in the excitement of it and you just want to keep giving.
We're working on that.
Yeah,
we're working on that one.
Awesome. Like that's the kind of thing that I have hope for, is like, I love this industry and I love the people that make all this content.
So I was reminded with what Mxiety was saying, I was reminded of a quote that says, thousands of candles can be lit from a single flame, and the life of the flame will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. And I think, like, I want to go back and reiterate the 3 points I made earlier, right? Accessibility, safety, and inclusivity. If you are being inclusive and you are taking the voice of those who are different from you and amplifying it and sharing it, that's important. If you are willing to give your opinion and your thoughts and your voice to try and make space for yourself and for others within the industry, that's important. If you are doing the work of trying to make things accessible, both within the industry, within content creation, that's important. And to remember like those three things, it doesn't matter where in the industry you fall. If you work on, even on an individual level, if you work on trying to make the space for others, if you work on trying to give that accessibility, focus on that safety, work on that inclusivity, like those things will eventually kind of come together, and we might be able to make a better, safer space for everyone who wants to be involved. Not that it's easy, but it's something we should strive for.
God, what a great note to end this on. Thank you, all four of you. Thank you a million times over for sharing your stories, for sharing your opinions, for sharing your expertise, for being so honest with us. This is going down as one of my favorite panels I've ever been a part of. A million thank yous.